everybody to another episode of Sync Riffs. In the studio, LA-based music supervisor, Jonathan Lane. Good morning, Jonathan. So good to have you on the episode.
Thanks so much for having me, man. How's it going?
It's going good, man. It's been a minute. I think the last time we saw each other was at the Guild of Music Supervisors Awards.
For sure.
And man, here we are in May, and I really appreciate you taking the time out and to set things up from one Angelino to another. I know I'm taking you back in the time travel machine, Burbank High School, and then that took you to Cal State University, Fresno.
Right.
And man, continuing that analog of being a triple threat. So 5 Alarm Music back in the day, then Clearly Music Supervision, your own company. And then most recently, Jonathan, congrats on being the VP of Sync and Partnerships at Slipstream Music.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
Where do you stand? I almost left out. Also, board member of the CCC, and we'll say something towards the end of the podcast. You're also an artist, correct? I know on your birthday you released a song.
I did indeed. Yeah, for sure. I have a band project. We could definitely talk about that.
Amazing. Well, we both know, it's a great time to, we're both veterans in the music industry. And to kind of set the stage into what you do at Slipstream Music, I think, Jonathan, a great sort of ripped from the headlines, I wanted to share an article that came out and that's gone viral, and we can kind of set it up, which sets up the stage. And basically, it was the dessert chain called Crumble.
Yeah.
With a alleged unauthorized use of music for artists such as Taylor Swift, Lizzo, and Beyonce in TikTok posts. So that's hitting the headlines with, potential music copyright violations with Warner Music Group. And I think, tell us about, for the uninitiated with social media, what's going on in this piece and what sort of folks need to know about, copyright 101. And you can't just take a composition that might be owned by a label or publisher and put it in your social media post.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely, and working on the music supervision side, I see it a lot where clients of mine, I do music supervision direct to a lot of different brands. And it's, so much of what we do in our industry from the sync perspective or the music supervision perspective, I feel like is just educating the clients about the process. We're sort of in this like educational sort of like role in addition to, all the other aspects of our job that we have to touch to manage the process of music and media. But so much of that is educating brands on the importance of making sure in the process of what it's like to be able to, obtain and negotiate the rights for music to be used in their content. And you'd be surprised how many large brands just don't know about that, or feel like they need to. They're like, it's just like a little organic social post. We're just throwing it up on our stories. We're just going to do this. It's going to be gone in 24 hours, things like that. And yeah, I mean, that's just not the case. I mean, like, in the music ecosystem, it really hinges, the fact that record sales went away a long time ago. Sync revenue really sort of like replaced that as a revenue stream for artists. Rights holders are especially on high alert to be able to protect some of that revenue for their artists and their writers. And also as an industry, we have to make money as well, So, the days of sort of like, skating by, throwing in some popular music and hoping that it's not going to be detected is sort of gone. And it's really, I think, just highlights the importance of what music supervision and music clearance folks are doing. And the importance of engaging somebody for that sort of a role is really, it's also to protect the brand and the interests of the brand, to make sure that the rights are intact for the music that they're using in the piece. And I think Crumble's it's a really perfect example of that. And it's honestly one of many. And we see it over on the Slipstream side of things. We have a song that's one of the most popular long-standing songs in the TikTok space. It's called The Funny Song. And it's like that little song where it's like do 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 do. It's like they sync it up with like little cute animal videos and stuff, and like
Sure.
or just like cutesy videos. But it's one of the most popular songs on TikTok, and it has been for an extremely long time. It's probably in the top 10 for, I don't know, could be almost like a decade, however long that TikTok's kind of been around.
Hmm.
And that is a huge performance earner and a really big piece of the revenue picture for that composer, you know? But we see brands all the time who
Hmm.
are, doing large paid partnerships and things like that where they, are trying to leverage that song to help enhance their content or make it feel relatable to their audience. And only until recently were they even able to actually use the song, because now it's in TikTok's commercial music library. It's called the CML, which is where brands can access via TikTok through their own portal to be able to access music that can be used for brands. But
I
prior
see.
to that, we'd be reaching out to different brands saying like, "Hey, notice that you use this song in this, paid media spot for this big branded spot on social media. Like, there's no license in place,
I
and
see.
so, Crumble, it's mind-boggling that
Mm.
a company that's so large, falls into finds these themselves in these positions, because you'd think that there's a lawyer in the room or somebody's in the room saying like, hey, you're not allowed to do it. But
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I think it's still a little bit of the Wild West in that way, because of the nature of the content that's being created on TikTok and it being user generated. It feels as though you can, as a brand, fly a little bit fast and loose because of the nature of the content feels low touch. But the
Yeah.
reality
Yes.
is that the influencer content and the brand content that's coming out on TikTok, while it doesn't feel like traditional advertising maybe, and it feels like there's instances of virality in it,
Mm.
it that is the new high touch branded content. And then rights holders like us need to be compensated for elevating the content.
I love that phrase that you just used, Jonathan. And, to your point, to bookend it, not too long ago, I saw a piece. I think it was University of Southern California, similarly in a similar position using a track without the correct rights. And I
Right.
pulled up as a great segue your company's website here. So, Music Without Limits, 650,000 plus songs to tell your story anywhere. So, for the uninitiated, I
Mhm.
would love to turn the mic to you, Jonathan. And what's the basic setup of the site? How does it work? So there's two sides, correct? There's content creators, and then also you guys provide a conduit for artists to provide that music that folks can use for their campaigns.
Right. I mean, when at the inception of Slipstream Music, it started as sort of a answer to kind of like the royalty free style music libraries that have entered into the space, like the Epidemics and Artlist and companies like that. But I think that as a brand, we really realized quickly that to compete with a lot of those, if we wanted to compete with those style companies, of which we didn't even really feel aligned with, because we never wanted to be a royalty free library.
Mhm.
I think that we realized that the cost of acquisition for customers is very high. Whoever is spending the most in digital advertising in that specific sector of the music library space is acquiring the most amount of customers. And so, if you want to outspend Artlist and spend $4 million a year or more on digital marketing, then really you're becoming a digital marketing company, and you're less a music company in our eyes. So, I think that Slipstream, they realized early on, like, they don't want to be a digital marketing company. They want to be a music company that's artist forward and composer forward. And we don't have any interest in being a royalty free library, and we never were going to anyway. So
Mhm.
there's sort of a moment, just to give you the rundown of the evolution of the company. There's sort of a moment where they realized, okay, we're going to kind of abandon ship on this concept of like trying to compete in that space. And we want to go more towards the traditional production music library world, like the Warner Chappell production musics or the BMGs or the APMs or the audio networks or the five alarm,
Hmm.
but for them to be able to compete in that space, it became a matter of uh, quantity of tracks and variety, and they didn't have the content. So what they decided to do was they decided by way of acquisition to acquire the catalogs from Five Alarm, Cavendish, who's based out of the UK, and the Jingle Punks catalog, and essentially bring it all into one business that is now called Slipstream. And we've sort of reverted back to just a traditional production music library, just like the majors that you might know. And actually, we have over 900,000 songs now, but since
Wow.
this was out, so we're
Sure.
the largest independent music library in the world, and it's more of a traditional model. But the thing is that, I think that, me coming on and a lot of the conversations that we have internally is so much about, listening to what the market is telling us that they want, instead of us being sort of siloed in our own echo chamber of ideas and what we think the market should do. And the market is telling us that they like the Epidemics website, and they like Artlist website, and they like that style of searchability, and they like the tech. They might
Hmm.
not like the music as much, or they might not like how vast or the quantity of music or the variety. So we're sort of taking from a few different models. We're saying,
Yeah.
we want to build a website that's industry lean and sort of plays more into what folks are really liking about royalty-free style music platforms
Mm.
without a royalty-free right structure and more of a traditional production music library like catalog structure, that so we can be doing deals directly with studios and networks just like a traditional production music library would. So we
Yeah.
sort of see ourselves as sort of sitting in this like hybrid world, which I believe, in which the business believes, that is what the future model of this business will end up looking like. It's going to be something that's a hybrid between these two worlds, where
Hmm.
we're protecting the revenue of artists and writers, and we're also offering it in a platform that's digestible and future forward thinking, is kind of the concept of the business.
100%. And, tip of the hat. And you had mentioned, but back in the day, the founders of Jingle Punks that are still involved with Slipstream, Jesse Corwin and then Dan DeMol.
Yeah,
And Jingle Punks was revolutionary as well, similarly breaking into that, correct, with production music, but
right.
really that foray into advertising and providing a conduit for indie artists in that lane, if you want to touch on. And
Yeah.
this kind of just overlays of the current 2.0 configuration, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Dan DeMol is really instrumental. He comes from a really heavy tech background, and he has a really great vision, and not just a great like mind for building a successful business, but also a really great tech brain. And Jingle Punks, that when they launched the Jingle Player back in the day, which it was the very first website where you could access a music library repertoire online. So that was one of the reasons why Jingle Punks was launched into popularity in early days, was because they were like, hey, your editors can just go on here on the database and download what they need and everything. And they don't have to sift through hard drives and do everything. They can access it all remotely. And it's where a lot of it was a really big feather in their cap to be able to be more tech forward. So the through line, if there's any from Jingle Punks, of which, to be honest, outside of the actual repertoire, we've pretty much dissolved the brand entirely, and
Mm,
it's more of just an asset. It's
sure.
more of an asset thing for us. The Jingle Punks, Five Alarm, and Cavendish, or Jingle Punks and Five Alarm brands, have all but been sort of just like amalgamized into just this one brand that is now Slipstream. And it's more of like a catalog acquisition sort of play for us. So we have the content to be able to do the deals, but ultimately we're not really interested in doing the same thing. We don't want to create We don't have any interest in creating a BMG production music, and there's no knock to those folks. I work with them on the supervision side all the time. I love all those libraries, but we don't have any interest in doing something that feels like it's been done. We don't want to be a traditional production music library, and we don't think that that's the future of the business. So I think that, for us, the focus in tech is really important. That's a huge initiative for us. And then the focus on championing real artists and artistry and lifting up songwriters is a huge aspect of what we do. And trying to be really good curators of talent behind the scenes is a really important part of what we do as an initiative too.
So important, Jonathan. And, in this day of, AI and everyone
Mhm.
being concerned about, what's going to be happen with the livelihood of independent artists. And, yourself, a music supervisor, and fellow supervisors I've spoken to in the past, is, that human touch will still always need independent artists, real artists. AI as a tool is one thing, but storytelling through music and the picture, it still comes down to the true emotions and stories of real artists. So hats off to
Yeah.
what you guys are championing there.
Thank you.
And yeah, similarly, a great sort of segue or to bookend, because there's some terms for the uninitiated.
Mhm.
If you want to spend a couple minutes on when folks hear that term royalty free,
Mhm.
and also let's weave it into splice, because I'm helping out with the Guild of Music Supervisors on the education side, and there's a big, a lot of artists out there say, hey, I read the terms and condition of the Splice Pack, and it says I can use this in my song, it's royalty free. So if you want to touch on, some of the nuances there on
Mhm.
what is a royalty free song, and what rights are covered there.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's sort of a like colloquial kind of definition of royalty free, which has just been popularized throughout our industry, which is not the correct one. It's not exactly correct that a royalty, a lot of folks, productions, brands, they see royalty free and they assume that they assume that they don't have to pay royalties,
Mm,
right? Which is true because it's on the onus of the platform to pay royalties, and the platforms and the royalties are generated by the fees that are being generated between the negotiations of the platform and ASCAP and BMI and the performing rights organization. So YouTube, for example, takes out a extensive, expensive annual license with ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, GMR, and all the international PROs to be able to perform, have the music being performed on their channels. And then the money that's generated from those negotiations, of which there's many with every studio and network, creates a royalty supply, which is then by way of cue sheets and usage reports is paid out accordingly to all the writers and all the interests that are involved in the song. So, I guess all this to say, a lot of brands are scared of the concept of having to pay royalties themselves, and a lot of productions are. 95% of the case, they never will have to, because the network that in which the platform in which it airs or is going to be the one that is responsible for royalties, and they've negotiated a license with BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, and GMRs.
I see.
The reality is that there's really not much royalty-free music until recently.
Mm,
For you to be a truly royalty-free catalog source, your music would have to be basically have to be unregistered music. So it wouldn't be registered at all with ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, all those folks.
right. Okay.
So, that's the only way to like really truly have a royalty-free structure. There's also, if we want to get into the minutia, which we don't have to, there's
Mhm.
here in the United States, we have the ability to grant direct performance licenses to platforms as well, because of our non-monopolistic laws that we have here in the United States, because we have competing performing rights organizations. We're able to opt out of them altogether and grant a direct license to a platform in which the royalties are upfront loaded
Okay.
in the negotiation of the licensing fee, but we don't have to get into all of that. So
Sure.
there's other instances in which royalties might not be traditionally generated, But
Mm.
for all this to say, there's only a few sources that are truly royalty free,
Mm.
and there's not a ton of them. And also, that being said, a majority of brands and productions will never have to pay royalties. That's not really the job of that's not really the way it works. The platforms pay the royalties.
Okay. Very cool. And I can post some links up because I think similarly, artists who create a new composition using like a sample pack from Splice,
Yeah.
and they're under the impression that it's quote royalty free. I can use it for creating a new piece of music. But we know from the music
Mhm.
supervision side of things, if you get a song and everything is lifted from Splice, are you seeing that? And what's sort of, the cautionary tale for producers and artists in that lane?
I think that I'm not super familiar. I don't want to speak too much because I haven't read the terms and conditions. Like, really, I'm not familiar with the terms and conditions on the splice, right? So I don't want to pretend to know about that. But I think one of the issues that folks come across is if they're leveraging almost the entirety of the production based on a splice sample, and it popularizes the splice sample,
Yeah.
then now it becomes a meaningful piece of the publishing and like writing share, and then that's something that needs to be accounted for.
Mm.
So I think that there's something that has to do with the significance in which it's being leveraged in the production where it matters. I think, like, we tell folks that if you're going to use something like a splice, maybe use it similar to how folks use AI, where you can use it for inspiration, but ultimately this is on the Slipstream side. Ultimately, you want to kind of create your own samples just
Yeah.
to be safe.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and I think this is a great segue. And if you want to talk to Jonathan about a little bit how long you've been a board member at the California Copyright Conference, and how can folks, I'll post a link through to the website, and you guys hold panels, and tell us more about the CC.
Yeah, so the CCC is actually one of the longest, if not the longest standing sort of music advocacy organizations in the entire West Coast, definitely, but definitely one of the oldest ones, probably in the United States. And it's been around a really, really long time. And we're sort of the idea of the CCC and its inception was to be able to bring together the music community and to talk about relevant issues that are within our industry that are affecting us as music publishers, folks that are in music law, legal fields, to be able to discuss them and to be able to make each other aware of different happenings within our business that impact our revenue or our day-to-day work.
Mhm.
And so it's always, at its inception, has always been sort of has been sort of an educational resource for folks that are in the music space, and also a great resource for networking and meeting other like-minded folks within the industry for us to be able to get to know each other and everything like that. So it's been always sort of this organization that brings people together
Mhm.
um, in the music space. And from the membership of the CCC, which has grown pretty steadily over the years, there's a lot of different roles within that are represented. So there's music supervisors, artists, composers, publishers, indie publishers. There's people from A&R side of things, major labels, major publishers, people who are attorneys. It really runs the gamut, and it kind of just brings everyone together. And then every single month, for the most part, every month we do a virtual panel. We used to have them all in person, but ever since COVID, we kind of swapped over to a virtual model. And then we also do several Los Angeles-based in-person events throughout the year. We do a really big Christmas holiday party every single year that's really highly attended. People love going to that. We do a spring mixer that's in person that we just had recently. We do some in-person panels throughout the year, usually one or two a year, that are always really well attended. And yeah, it's a resource for emerging and experienced folks in the music space to be able to talk about things like we're talking about now, which is like
Yeah.
samples and AI
Mhm.
and music rights and the
Yeah.
legal ramifications and all these topics.
Huge, very important, because similarly, whenever we post up our website, our podcast, always the disclaimer is consult a lawyer if in doubt when it comes to, very legal matters. And I love what you guys do at the CCC because, like you said, a lot of independent artists, they may not have those connections. And once
Mhm.
they make a contact with, like shout out to Steve Winigradsky, folks who've been around and know inside and out the ins and outs of copyright publishing. And what I'd love to touch on, Jonathan, because two sides of that coin, from being both a seller and a buyer of music, from being a supervisor and then when you're at 5 Alarm Music, having walked both of those lanes, is there one particular preference, or that you really, being a supervisor or being on the selling side of music, what's sort of, or a blend, what's that sweet spot for you?
I've always said that I prefer the culture, the working culture of working with artists and composers and songwriters. I feel like working on behalf of songwriters and composers to help to make sure that they are making a living is really important to me. I'm definitely somebody who where that side of the business is something that I feel really comfortable in. As I started Clearly Music, the supervision company, in 2015, and it's grown steadily year on year to the point where, now I have a music coordinator and I have a partner that I'm bringing in, and in the business, who's a fellow music supervisor, and it's expanding by nature of the fact that we just have a lot of work coming in. And a lot of folks ask me like what's the end goal? Are you like trying to like grow it to the point where like you just focus on that and then you don't? And I think that like I will always do both as long as I can. It's never been my intention to grow Clearly Music to the point where that's like my full-time job. I've always wanted to have a foot in both worlds because I enjoy them both. I think I do like the pacing of the sync side of the rights holder side more so than the production side, where every single thing feels urgent and
Yeah.
everything seems like the sky is falling at all times. But that being said, I also really like working on, music supervising a really cool project and seeing it come to fruition and being able to have that sort of creative impact. And also, I'm such a relationship person that I really enjoy being able to work with folks like yourself and getting to know the people at the majors and like and all the indie publishers and all the indie labels, and
Mm,
connecting with artists directly is really important to me. So sort of sitting at the cross section of
yeah.
both allows me to meet more people, and I think that that's me personally.
Mm.
I believe that that's what we're put on this earth to do, is to connect with each other.
100%. And just working in the industry, and I know, Jonathan, way back, you had a Bachelor of Arts in English Language Literature. And I'm curious because I had Deva Anderson and Rachel Lotzenheiser on the other day, and we were talking about internships and breaking it in the industry. So I'm curious, what was sort of just before you landed the gig at 5 Alarm Music? Were there certain internships how did you first break into the industry way back?
Yeah, so my very first gig, I was working at Warner Brothers, not doing anything music related. I was like a creative assistant in a in the consumer products division at Warner Brothers, and I really wanted to be a writer. And I felt like it was like a foot in the door for me to be able to. I was working on writing a lot of scripts and stuff at the time, and I wanted to be able to be in a position where a studio would potentially have the right to first refusal on things I was working on, which Warner Brothers had. I could submit my scripts; they would give me they would read them, give me notes and stuff. I had to give them my scripts before I went elsewhere with them. So that was a really important thing. But at the time, I was also in a touring band, and like that was increasingly becoming a more important part of my life. And so one of the people the recording studio that we were recording our music at as a band was owned by a dude named Josh Young, who has a company called Atrium Music.
Hmm.
And since I grew up in LA and I knew a lot of folks that worked in the industry, all of my friends were all became editors and producers and directors and stuff. And I was always the music guy in our crew, sort of. And so, there was an opportunity to be able to work with Atrium to pitch the Atrium catalog and try to get it used and licensed in TV and film. And I really wanted to transition into having music being my full-time focus. I didn't know how to do all those things. And so much of early days Atrium was all of us really figuring out how to do everything as we went, and we'd make mistakes and we'd adjust and we'd figure things out, and we're just building this company and building this brand. It was a small scrappy team, and we're all still good friends. I'm still good friends with Josh too. But I was there for, I don't know, I want to say it was maybe like 4 years or so, 4 or 5 years. And then I ended up moving on to Audio Network. And I was one of Audio Network's first like LA based employees. And so for a while it was, just running around town, trying to tell everybody about what this little UK company is doing overseas, and evangelizing kind of like the music that we're creating, and helping to market it and bring the brand to the US kind of TV market, TV, film, and trailers. And so I was there for like 3.5 years, and then I left, went to Five Alarm for like 6 years, and then went back to Audio Network like for a year and a half, and I was overseeing the US business for them. And so it's kind of came full circle. And then now I'm at Slipstream, which is sort of a different iteration of Five Alarm, since it was since Slipstream acquired Five Alarm. So I've sort of just yo-yoed back between two companies, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of what the career looks like. And then in 2015, I started Clearly Music while I was at Audio Network, because I had folks that were my friends wanted me to music supervise stuff. That's what they were like asking if I could work on things. I ended up taking over the music supervision role at a trailer house called Herzog, which at the time Trigotoven was the music supervisor, but he was leaving to start at Format Entertainment. And he was taking I believe as a music coordinator role at the time there. And so he handed the job off to me. And then from there, that's where I started, working with all these different kind of producers. And then organically, my business is Clearly Music has sort of just grown organically by way of meeting other people. And then they move over to other trailer houses, and then they ask if I can work with them there. And then I meet folks there, and then people recommend me. A majority of my work comes on the music supervision side, comes from my friends, which I'm really grateful for, like genuine friends from like childhood. And we all are on a group chat all day long. And, we all talk all day long about work, but it's also fun. And, and yeah, it's awesome. Like being able to basically work with my best friends from high school every day on projects. It's like one of them owns a podcast production company.
Nice.
One of them is the senior vice president of marketing at MGM, who is one of my biggest clients now, obviously. One of them is a part owner and at a trailer house that MGM hires, and they hire me as well. And one of them is a creative director and editor who I work with all the time, and we all work on projects together constantly. And then outside of that, I do music supervision for some other trailer houses that don't have anything to do with that network of friends, and also some brands as well, from just organically developing relationships and stuff.
Man, Superman Energizer vibes, and then Lady Sloth. Let's segue. When do you find time? And you just put out a single called Disaster at that with your bandmate Justina Chandler. I'm going to share up on. I love the track, love the artwork. I'm a fitness enthusiast, and I do I do between weight training and also boxing, hitting the boxing mitts. And I met Sugar Ray Leonard about 10 years ago.
Oh, no
so
way.
When I saw the artwork, I was like, whoa, what is this? So yeah, tell us about when did you guys form the band? And I'm going to share the track or share the visual on Spotify. Yeah, love the cut, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, Justina and I started the project, I think probably in like 2021, maybe, I want to say. At the time, her and I we had met at Durango Songwriter Conference, I do that every once in a while as an industry guest. She was working at a company called Unicorn Sync, which she's not associated with anymore. But I met her by way of that. And then we started dating, and then like we ended up, so we were in like a relationship, and I had a bit of a songwriting background. She is one of the best songwriters that I've honestly ever met, and she's an insane vocal talent, and also, I mean, she has a master's in songwriting. She's like a genius songwriter. This was sort of a creative endeavor that her and I put together just as a fun thing to do together, that would just kind of like bring us closer, and just for funsies. And so we ended up writing and putting out an EP, I think in 2022 or 2023, which did fairly well. A label called Trailing 12 Records ended up putting it out for us, with which is owned by a dude named Nico, who's a good friend of mine, and he's been a really great champion of the music, and he has a really, really strong label roster. Also represented for Sync and stuff. But really, the project doesn't have there's no like delusions of like the band's gonna make it energy or anything like that. It's more like, if we have a good song concept or a good hook that we have in mind and we both want to see the song through, then we'll do it, and then we'll put it out, which is what happened with Disaster. Like, Disaster was a song that was like a sort of post-breakup song between her and myself. And once we had like no contact for a bit, and we've like got some distance from our romantic relationship, we reapproached things as friends, and we decided to see this song through. And then since then, we've been also just, we're starting to write our next one. So we've like, it's been really kind of cathartic, because you're working through the emotions of a relationship ending and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But by way of music, I think her and I were able to really forge like a legitimately close, like, special friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's really rare in my experience in relationships to be able to like maintain something like that, like after you separate. And I think music is the thing that really kind of like help forge that for us. And so this song that we just released is sort of I don't know, it's sort of like a kind of like launches the next chapter of like how we've defined our relationship, which is one of friendship and creativity.
And I think, Jonathan, that part and parcel is, what, as a sync agent, and what you as a supervisor, what we look for when we hear thousands and hundreds of tracks, is authentic storytelling from the heart. And whether it syncs to picture obviously depends on the narrative on screen, but the vocals, production, and keeping it simple. I mean, there's so much. I was chatting with like Burt Blackrock the other day, and when you're looking at your DAW and you've got 100 plugins, I always say, there's no substitute for creativity. Keep it simple, it's down to the lyrics and the storytelling. And it could just be the vocal and acoustic guitar. And what was the song? I'll think of it in a minute. But, predecessor to Coldplay, what the song, You're Beautiful, British artist, I'll think of it. But just, I love that, same with your artwork, fences, head game. Do you guys do the artwork as well? I'll reshare it on the screen.
The label ends up engaging an artist, and they do that, and for us, which we're really grateful that I don't have to come up with that, because I'm not that guy. But I feel like they've put together a really cool kind of like vibe for the music by doing these like single one-off pieces of simple artwork, and I really like the style of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, the boxing glove for Disaster is about, there's a line that's like, I am a boxer, like kind of a thing in it. So it's so that's the tie-in with it. And yeah, I like it too. I'm glad you like the artwork. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. And before we button things up, for all we know, and that's very cool, Jonathan, back to when you were a writer working at Warner Brothers, but who knows? You might have, is there a script somewhere there and somewhere in the shelves? And if a showrunner or a producer said, "Hey, Jonathan, what do you got in the archives. Would you ever go that route of working on producing or writing a show or a film?
I haven't done mostly. I mostly just write really good emails these days. But to be honest, I several years ago, I ended up writing a script with a buddy of mine, a couple of friends of mine, for a Super Bowl like ad spot that was for the brand DraftKings, and it was
Mm.
starring this. The ad was starring Channing Tatum, and it was surrounding a movie that he was in called Dog, which had released around the same time. So it was this like co-branded Super Bowl, like kind of like ad spot between the film Dog and DraftKings, and they needed a script that essentially was just like poking fun at Channing Tatum. And so we got together and took a crack at writing sort of a spec kind of like thing to throw our ring in the hat. And it ended up getting shot and released, and it's still on YouTube. So I technically did write a script in the last, in the last 3 or 4 years, and it's still out there, and awesomely, it actually ended up being a really cool piece that was a Super Bowl spot, and I also music supervised the spot too.
Cool. I think I remember seeing that, and it was making the
Social media rounds for a
social
little.
media. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And so very cool, Jonathan. And before we wrap, I always like to ask our guests in a fun, creative way: is there any particular song or artist that's on repeat right now on your playlist that whether U.S. based or out of the U.S. that you're listening to?
Um. Yeah. God, there's so many. It's one of those things where whenever somebody asks you like what you're listening to, all of a sudden you can't remember a single band. You're like, do bands even exist? I'm gonna jog through my little playlist of things I'm really into like lately. It's funny, I've been because of my work as a music supervisor, so much of it is like things that I'm working on starts to guide like my current taste at the time, and I'm working on a bunch of stuff recently for Stagecoach. And so like randomly I'm in this like weird like country kick where I'm like, wow, country is really great. There's Maren Morris is coming out with an album who's like she's a great pop artist. She's coming out with a new album, and it's not out yet. I think it's out in the beginning of May, but there's some singles that are released off of it. We just used a license a track of hers in an ad spot as well. But I've been like listening to what's currently released of her forthcoming album kind of over and over again. There's an artist named Ider, Ider, who has an album in 2025 that got released that I've, really, really loved. Still Woozy had a really good album, a
Mhm.
recent release that I was really into. But yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. My kind of like artist and band tastes are like just completely all over the place,
Uh-huh.
and and then obviously I've been listening to a lot of Lady Sloth recently, which is like embarrassingly, I can't even show my Spotify Wrapped this year because I know what it's going to say, and it's going to be like this super narcissistic, like listening streak of my own song over and over again. But part of it is because I do think it's a good song, but a majority of it is because I wanted to have streams. So I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll listen to it like twice a day, So like, I'm sure that that's going to end up being my top stream song this year is going to be my own Lady Sloth song, which is embarrassing, and it'll keep me away from sharing it on social media, to be honest. But yeah.
But and I'm sure you can relate, is finding the bandwidth at the end of the day. We hear so much music, and then to be able to listen to music for pleasure, it's tough because sometimes, unless you're taking that time to meditate or work out, and you want to hear up tempo cuts to get you in the groove for working out or what have you.
Yeah.
But no, very cool and thanks for sharing. And to close out, I don't know if you still do it, but our cohort and artist from Blue Buddha, Monica Young, was like, Charles, his supervisor named Jonathan Lane, you would do the office hours where folks would come in, and I'm sure time is tough now, but that's huge. Get another way that you give back on the education side to artists, where they can pop in and ask you
Mhm.
anything on the sync lane.
Yeah, I do. I don't even know how long it's been now, but I do this thing called office hours, and I offer it on my Instagram, which is at music clearly. And it's my work Instagram handle. And yeah, I offer two 30-minute one-on-one slots a week typically. And people reserve them once I post them, which is at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on my Instagram story. People reserve them just by whoever replies first and snags a spot, then they reserve it. And yeah, it's honestly been one of the things that I feel like most proud of in my career at this point. It started as like sort of I don't know. It's kind of started as full transparency. It started as sort of like this like endeavor where I felt like the industry of sync was sort of like becoming this thing where there was a lot of unqualified course courses and
Mhm.
and experts in the space that were I found out were charging exorbitant amounts of money for folks to take their course. And I'm like, I've never heard of any of these people. How like,
Right,
you know what I
right.
mean? Like they just don't see it. It's not like someone like yourself or myself or the folks that we know who have been doing this for so long and actively working in the industry. It's like these like ancillary like people that it appeared to me as though they are preying upon the desperation of artists, writers, and composers for their own
Yeah,
financial gain
yes.
in hopes that these folks might be gleaming some insight into making a living out of their work. And
Right, right.
I felt discontent with that concept. So I ventured to say like I bet I could inject more real value in a 30-minute one-on-one call for completely free
Mhm, mhm.
and save them the trouble of getting scammed by
Yeah,
an online course that
yeah,
might overpromise and completely underdeliver, or not even be, or with some sort of a fake internet coach who's like teaching about sync, right?
yes.
That was the concept of office hours. And then I realized that I really, really just loved the mentorship aspect of it. And then it became something where the energy was completely different and it shifted,
Mhm.
where I realized that the more that I was being of service to this industry, the better I felt and the better that I felt about my life and my day to day. And I truly believe that I'm a semi spiritual person, but I truly believe that if you're deriving some sort of monetary benefit or any sort of benefit from something in your life, that you should be also trying to give back into that same thing. And I feel like the universe
Mm,
sort of rewards you for having sort of a secular sort of like mentality towards or exchange with the thing that you're deriving pleasure or that you're deriving sort of like benefit from. And I and call it superstition, but I feel like this house of cards that I've managed to build in my career could all fall apart if I don't continue to make space for myself to be able to give back to this industry in some sort of a way, because I feel like it's that important to me. So you know, now I'm really proud to say that I've met with over 350 people from all around the world one on one over the course of years. I offer it every single week, even if they don't get reserved, which by the way, the last couple of weeks, people haven't been reserving them. I still offer them and put them out there.
mhm.
And just the act of doing it, just and feeling like I'm regimented
Yeah,
about being of service, it suffices for like for me and how I can feel about my life and the way that I work in this industry. Not to sound like I'm certainly not perfect and or anything like that, but I'm just saying that that's the mentality that I feel like that I need for me to be able to be successful in doing this. So yeah, I kind of I feel like especially in the last like 3 years or so that I've been doing it, I really owe a lot of the success in my mind that I've experienced in my career to the energy that I've given out and to
yeah.
trying to make myself available and be like a champion of composers and artists.
Well, you are a rare breed, Jonathan, and good karma, like you said, and Blue Buddha for a reason. My late mom was Buddhist, and like you said, that energy that we put out, it comes three tenfold
Mhm.
for the good energy we put forth. And you were so gracious at the time. We had traded emails, and then when it was a genuine meetup when I saw you at the guild,
Yeah.
and you remembered me, so I'm really grateful that we connected today. And
Yes.
thank you so much, Jonathan, and I appreciate as always all the work you do, and continued much success. And I'm sure we'll be seeing each other at this in the summer at the Guild of Music Supervisors conference. And until then, but thank you, Jonathan, for taking the time out. I'll post links to your website, your socials, and folks can continue to connect with you through the office hours and everything you do. So namaste, and thanks, Jonathan, again for stopping by.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that, and it's really cool what you're building, and giving this industry a platform and being able to connect it with folks who want to get some insight into what it is that we do. I think it's really awesome. So thank you.
My pleasure, and everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next week. All right.
Go.